The CCP's Arctic ambitions, closing in on America's front door, threatening Europe's security. Pure self-indulgent theater. CCP military drills fire rockets while middle-aged women strike poses shouting, unification. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense releases photos of PLA J-16s monitored by Taiwanese fighters. What signal does this send? Chinese buyers purchase a Japanese island, raising alarm, residents crowdfund to buy it back. Trump warns Tehran, if it continues rebuilding ballistic missile capabilities, the US will back Israel in striking Iran again. Escalation intensifies. US forces surgically destroy a Venezuelan drug loading port. Don't miss the next drop, subscribe and hit the bell. The Chinese Communist Party's scientific research submarine conducted its first voyage this summer beneath the Arctic ice sheet, traveling thousands of feet below the surface. This move shocked the United States and its allies, and the military and commercial implications are chilling. The CCP has declared itself a so-called near-Arctic state, hoping to use this unofficial label to place itself on equal footing with the United States and Russia. It has vigorously claimed that its activities in the Arctic are peaceful, reasonable, and legal. However, U.S. national security officials say that the CCP's undersea exploration provides new evidence that its threat in the Arctic, known as the High North, is growing rapidly. A Department of Homeland Security report in November stated that this year saw an unprecedented number of Chinese military and research vessels operating near Arctic waters off Alaska. Western maritime strategists and military officials say that mastering Arctic navigation technology would allow Beijing to obtain valuable data on natural resources beneath melting ice caps, dramatically shorten commercial shipping routes, and deploy nuclear submarines closer to potential targets, including the United States. The Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and U.S. Air Force General Alexis Grinkwich said, the CCP is becoming increasingly aggressive across the entire High North. He added that Chinese vessels conducting scientific research often serve as cover for military purposes. Ryan Martinson, associate professor at the U.S. Naval War College's China Maritime Studies Institute, noted that the CCP revised its national security law in 2015 to include safeguarding national interests in polar regions, seeking unrestricted access to new shipping lanes and resources. He said there is substantial evidence that Beijing aims to conduct naval operations in the Arctic Ocean. Beijing insists that its commercial and research vessels in Arctic waters are peaceful. But retired Dutch Navy Admiral Rob Bauer said that while this used to be true, the situation has changed. He pointed out that beyond conducting joint aerial patrols with Russia, Beijing has now dispatched Coast Guard vessels resembling frigates near the Alaskan coastline. They are essentially warships, just painted white, Bauer said. He believes joint patrols with Russian naval vessels demonstrate that the CCP seeks military advantage rather than coastal security. As ice in the High North melts further, Chinese naval vessels using the same shortcuts as commercial ships could accelerate their access to the Atlantic. Beijing envisions future Arctic sea routes as a global commercial shortcut, what it calls the Polar Silk Road. This summer, Chinese authorities dispatched a cargo ship through the Arctic to Poland's port of Gdansk, cutting travel time in half compared with routes through the Suez Canal. Chinese officials said they plan to expand cross-Arctic freight cooperation with Russia, especially liquefied natural gas imports. During the Cold War, the Arctic served as a front line separating NATO members from Moscow. Today, Arctic waters have become gateways for the Chinese Navy into both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Western countries have already sounded alarms over the CCP's Arctic push. French Navy Admiral Pierre Vandier, in charge of NATO's future readiness, warned that Chinese naval forces could enter the Atlantic from the Pacific via the Arctic, bypassing more easily monitored and defended routes such as the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, or routes around South Africa. This means that for all of us, for NATO and the United States, the threat from the Pacific could be everywhere, Vandier said. If Asian forces appear in the Atlantic, that would be a game-changing event. We must be prepared. On December 30th, the second day of the CCP's encirclement drills around Taiwan, Chinese forces fired rockets into waters surrounding the island and deployed dozens of aircraft and vessels to simulate a blockade of Taiwanese ports. An AFP reporter witnessed the live-fire drills on Pingtan Island, the Chinese territory closest to Taiwan. Around 9 a.m. local time, a series of rocket launches sent white plumes streaking across the sky. At least 10 rockets were fired consecutively, their deafening noise drawing tourists to seaside railings as they pulled out their phones to record more than a dozen rockets launched within seconds. The reporter observed a group of middle-aged women striking poses for photos while shouting in unison, "Unification of the motherland." AFP reported that Taiwan said some designated drill zones were less than 12 nautical miles, about 20 kilometers, from Taiwanese territory. Taiwan Civil Aviation Administration said Beijing had declared a 10-hour, temporary danger zone that could disrupt aviation traffic in the region. More than 857 domestic, international, and transit flights were affected that day. Taiwan's Coast Guard said it dispatched 14 vessels to monitor Chinese naval activity, adopting a strategy of individual tracking to resolutely block Chinese ships. Taiwanese civilians remained calm. At a market in Taipei, 24-year-old fish vendor Chang Xingming said, "These drills have been going on for years. We're used to it." At the same market, 80-year-old fruit seller Sang Chongqi said, "War? Impossible. These are just intimidation tactics. If they really attacked Taiwan, they would pay the price." AFP noted that the previous day, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was not concerned about the CCP's military exercises. Now let's look at a 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds response by Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense. As CCP drills resumed, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense held a press conference and, following standard practice, released a photo taken by a Taiwanese F-16V monitoring a Chinese J-16 fighter. To ordinary viewers, this black and white image might seem unremarkable, but its meaning is profound. Military technology commentator James Sang wrote on Facebook on December 30 that the photo was taken using the F-16 vs Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod, essentially a fighter jet's super telescope, developed by Lockheed Martin. It allows pilots to clearly identify targets at extreme distances and guide precision weapons. This system plays a crucial role in Taiwan's F-16V upgrade program and has appeared frequently in recent Ministry of Defense monitoring images. Its core strength lies in ultra-long-range detection. For ground targets, it can detect moving objects from an altitude of about 15,000 meters. According to those who have seen the imagery, it can even make out license plates from that distance. More importantly, its air-to-air tracking range can reach up to 187 kilometers. This means Taiwanese fighters can monitor Chinese aircraft near the median line of the Taiwan Strait while flying on the eastern side of Taiwan's Central Mountain Range, seeing the front line from behind, without the opponent being aware. Unawareness is deadly. Earlier incidents involving Chinese aircraft and Japan using radar lock-ons caused international uproar. Those crude actions, short of actual combat, revealed impatience and risked exposing radar signatures. But the sniper pod emits no radar waves. It uses passive, silent tracking, only receiving signals rather than emitting them. When it locks onto an enemy aircraft, the opponent's radar warning receiver remains silent. By the time you hear the warning beep, the missile is already nearby. If you can see it, you can hit it, and the most terrifying part is that the target has no idea it's been locked on. To ordinary people, these photos may seem insignificant. But the Chinese Air Force knows exactly how humiliating it is to be photographed from that angle, especially without knowing when it happened. So when we hear about Chinese aircraft circling Taiwan, they themselves should understand that from the moment they take off, they are under constant surveillance. CCP media portrays this as saber-rattling, but in the calm skies of the Taiwan Strait, under layers of missile targeting, they are, in reality, gambling with their own lives. After covering the military drills, let's turn to another incident involving Chinese purchases of Japanese island land. Kasasajima, a tiny island in Yamaguchi Prefecture with only 7 registered residents, has recently become a national concern. Part of the island was purchased years ago by Chinese buyers. Now residents have launched a crowdfunding campaign to buy it back. Kasasajima sits at a strategic choke point in the Seto Inland Sea, covering less than 1 square kilometer and lying just 2 kilometers from Komatsu Port. Nearby are the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Forces Kure Base and the U.S. Marine Corps' Iwakuni Air Base, making it a sensitive strategic area. Due to aging demographics, the island has only 5 households and 7 registered residents, with just 3 people actually living there. Land registry records show that around 2017, a Chinese man living in Shanghai, along with his wife and a friend, purchased approximately 3,600 square meters of land on the island, citing plans to build a villa. Real estate agents say more Chinese buyers have recently targeted islands in the Seto Inland Sea through Tokyo and Osaka agencies. Japanese media photographed trees being cut down, foundations dug, and power poles erected, raising alarm. Local Assemblyman Takashi Ishimoto, a longtime opponent of CCP infiltration, warned, "If we allow this to continue, Kasasajima will become a Chinese island. Protecting this place means protecting Japan." However, Japan's Important Land Survey Act applies only within 1 kilometer of military facilities. Kasasajima lies outside that range and cannot be regulated. Japan still has no law directly banning foreign land purchases. Residents feel deeply uneasy. Resident Yagi Hyde said, "We're all old. If no one lives here in the future, Japanese people may become the minority." In October, residents and volunteers formed the Protect Kasasajima Association, advocating island protection and preventing large-scale foreign development without residents' knowledge. On December 9, the group launched a crowdfunding campaign seeking 20 million yen to buy back the land. So far, 1,870 people have contributed, raising over 11.9 million yen. The campaign runs until next May. Japan's government is also strengthening oversight. Economic Security Minister Kimi Onoda said that starting next April, corporations purchasing land or forests near security facilities must declare the nationalities of relevant personnel. Foreign buyers will also be required to report purchases to improve transparency and reduce security risks. On December 29, U.S. President Donald Trump said that if Iran continues rebuilding its ballistic missile capabilities, the United States will support Israel in striking Iran again. Asked whether he would back Israeli attacks if Iran resumed missile development or nuclear weapons efforts, Trump replied, "If they continue with the missile program, the answer is yes." During the war in June, both Israel and the U.S. targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. On the nuclear issue, Trump said U.S. support for Israeli strikes would be swift. After the war, Trump repeatedly warned Iran that attempts to rebuild uranium enrichment facilities would prompt further U.S. action. On June 22, the U.S. launched Operation Midnight Hammer, which Trump said had eliminated those facilities. The war ended with a U.S.-brokered Israel-Iran ceasefire. Until this statement, Trump had not publicly addressed Iran's missile capabilities since the war. Trump said he had heard Iran was considering alternative sites for nuclear facilities beyond those already struck. "They know the consequences," he warned. "They would be very severe, possibly worse than last time. If they do it, it would be a huge mistake." Speaking about Hamas, Trump said, "They will be given a very short time to disarm, without specifying a deadline. If Hamas continues to violate disarmament commitments, it would face terrible consequences." He added that among the 59 countries supporting his peace plan, including some outside the Middle East, many would want to enter Gaza to completely eliminate Hamas if it refused to disarm. Finally, let's look at reports of U.S. forces destroying a Venezuelan drug-loading port. On December 29, President Trump said U.S. military or intelligence units had recently struck a dock area in Venezuela believed to be a key drug shipping hub. He said a major explosion occurred and emphasized that it no longer exists. This marks the first known U.S. land strike since pressure on the Maduro regime intensified. Trump declined to provide details or confirm whether the military or CIA carried out the operation, saying only, "I know who did it, but I don't want to say." In October, Trump publicly confirmed authorizing CIA covert operations in Venezuela. In a December 26 interview with Republican donor John Catsimatidis, Trump said the U.S. had destroyed a large facility, hinting it was a drug shipping point. He added that U.S. forces had hit them hard 2 days earlier. Based on the timeline, the strike may have occurred after Christmas, coinciding with the deployment of the USS Gerald R. Ford in the Caribbean. The White House has not officially confirmed the strike. CNN cited U.S. officials saying Trump referred to drug production facilities, without further detail. Venezuela has issued no statements about any attack. In recent months, the U.S. has sharply escalated pressure on the Maduro regime, destroying at least 30 drug smuggling vessels in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific and tightening sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports. Oil sales account for nearly 90% of Venezuela's export revenue. The U.S. hopes to cut off the regime's economic lifeline. Bloomberg reported that Venezuela's state oil company PDVSA began shutting down oil wells in the Orinoco Belt on December 28 due to full storage capacity. Trump has repeatedly warned that the U.S. may strike land targets in Venezuela, including drug facilities, warehouses, or known smuggling routes. In August, the U.S. government offered a $50 million bounty for Maduro. Trump said Maduro's days as president are numbered. This unconfirmed but strongly implied land strike is widely seen as a major escalation in U.S. pressure on Venezuela, signaling an expanding scope of military and intelligence operations against the Maduro regime.